I got my readers on now. I would like to bring this policy meeting to order. So today at 5:31, the Policy Committee for Sacramento Metropolitan Fire District is now in order. We now have the public opportunity to discuss matters of public interest within committee scope, including items on or not on the agenda. Do we have any speakers?
No, I received no speaker cards.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there anyone online?
Not at this time, no.
Thank you very much. On the consent agenda, do we have any questions or comments or concerns about the consent agenda?
I have no question, Madam Chair, but I'd like to move, if we have no questions, I'd like to move the consent agenda.
Second.
Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Director Sailors,
Aye.
Director Clark, Director Gould.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. We'll move on to the action items. Number one, Board Policy 01.010.03, Purchasing and Contracting Policy. Chief Officer, Financial Officer Dave O'Toole, thank you for your presentation.
Certainly. And good evening, Madam Chair, board members, Fire Chief House, colleagues, members of the public. Yes, for tonight, for this action item, I'll be presenting on changes to the purchasing and contracting policy. Briefly, the changes fall into two areas, into procurement changes, process changes, and then we have a new section on gifts and gifts of public funds. The policy was last amended not too long ago, back in 2023. So a little perspective on where we are. So first, the procurement contract changes. Let's see, removes the references to real property, as that definition is broadly covered under personal property. So cleanup fix. Removes the requirement that all contracts must have purchasing office review and approval. Similarly, the changes recognize that purchasing will not evaluate the financials of every purchase of goods and services purchase. That's just not feasible with our current resources. It also demonstrates the district's compliance with public contract code pertaining to informal bidding for public projects. Under procurement changes, also updates the dollar limit on public projects that can be performed under district direction and establishes procedures on identifying bidders and bid solicitation. It specifies compliance with the provisions of public contract code related to formal bids above $220,000. It allows for automatic adjustments to these thresholds in conformance with law, as opposed to amending this policy every time that number changes. It allows for the board to approve emergency repairs without giving notice of bids as permitted by state law. In the gifts changes, it begins by citing the constitutional prohibition on gifts of public funds and recognizes that individuals who gift public funds and resources may be subject to criminal penalties, as well as if it's a purchasing card involved, they may lose their purchasing card access. It also clarifies that expenditures must be related to a public purpose consistent with the jurisdiction of the district, and direct employees to consult finance division if they have a question about whether or not it falls in that category. It gives a number of specific examples of what a gift would, let's call it an impermissible gift would be. Includes, just going to read some off for you: gift cards, gift baskets, flowers, coffee mugs, and other non-cash gifts. Gifts for employee birthdays, weddings, anniversaries, baby showers, and similar celebratory occasions. Expenses associated with farewell and retirement celebrations, bereavement or sympathy gifts and flowers, and promotional giveaways. And incidental travel costs, including fuel, parking, and transport. This section further acknowledges that divisions may still provide meals, refreshments, and tangible award items to employees, volunteers, and other attendees consistent with those policies pertaining to those activities. The gifts portion of this policy was developed in close coordination with Council Labra. And if he was here, I'd be thanking him. In closing, this is a board policy, so my recommendation is to review the purchasing contract policy and refer to the full board for approval later this month. Questions you may have.
Any questions? Thank you. Go ahead, Director Gould.
You bet. I know this comes as a shock as I've read this policy and have a quick question for you. If we can go to the policy version down on element number 2, where we talk a little bit about the gift of public funds. It goes on and it cites, as you mentioned, cites some of that language. I find it very difficult to read. As you look at the end of it, a whole new sentence says, in addition, use of any district credit card may be revoked as a standalone sentence. its flow is not good because we're talking about gifts of public funds and why you can't do that. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, by the way, a use of a credit card could be revoked. Well,
Hmm.
in what context is that sentence there? If you say, and in using a credit card for a gift of public funds, it could be, I get that part.
Yep.
But if you just take that entire sentence and cut it out, it makes no sense. It's not, and it's not at least connected to anything. And so I
Understand.
think,
Yep.
does that make sense to you? Because when I'm reading, I'm like,
Yeah, it
wow,
feels
that's a
like
big shift.
standalone.
We're talking about gifts of public funds and all of a sudden, hey, if you have a credit card, we could revoke it. Well, I got mine here tonight. Do you want it back? And so it just, I'm trying to put it in context. Just add that additional sentence that says, but in the violation of the gift of public funds policy, you have a credit card and it was utilized for that purpose, we'll revoke. Now I have it in context. People running around our organization with credit cards aren't now thinking, that's kind of a standalone sentence that doesn't.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
It does, and I'm reading it now. Yeah, maybe if it was sort of tacked on with the earlier sentence about civil and criminal penalties, and sort of
Yeah,
a
I
penalty,
mean,
give it a penalty
Yeah,
context.
I think it
Yeah.
helps an English reader to be able to find context
Mhm.
for when you make a pretty bold statement that we're going to revoke your credit cards just out of the blue.
Yeah.
How's this happening? So I think that's the one part of this entire long, lengthy, really good policy. I just was like, what? That's pretty harsh. So anyway,
I see what you mean.
thanks. If you could make that change now I'm suggesting maybe I do it as a motion, Ms. Chair, I agree and I'm willing to approve this, but the motion would be that language be clarified prior to moving it to the full board. That meet your
Yeah.
satisfaction?
Totally.
If you want to move it as such, I would second that motion.
Okay, great. I did it as a motion. If you could make that change, we'll then move it forward. Does that work?
That works for me.
Understood.
Okay, so I'll call the roll call vote that we are moving this forward to the board with the amendment that was suggested by Director Gould. Director Sailors,
Aye.
Director Clark, Director Gould.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. Our next action item is Board Policy 01.012.01 Debt Management Policy.
Okay, thank you. For this next action item, presenting changes to the debt management policy. This is an existing policy that guides the board on practices associated with financing for capital projects and is based on and in compliance with state law. This one was last amended in 2015, so it's been a little while. Let's see, as we were developing Measure O and the financing plan and so forth, I shared this with our municipal advisor and asked them, is there anything in our policy that you think needs to change to improve our position or anything that's problematic? The short answer is no. But as we went through it, there were some things that we thought we could tidy up. So long way of saying, if this were not to pass and not to move forward, it wouldn't affect the financing at all. But we do think there's an opportunity to clean things up. So with that sort of information, I'll describe some of the changes or describe the changes. Let's see, it specifies the type of debt issued will be reviewed and approved by the board of directors. So that's standard practice, but it just memorializes that in policy. It adds a recommended practice on how much variable rate debt to issue, no more than 20%. That's not an issue with GO bonds. We don't have any variable rate debt, but if that were to come along, that would be a threshold. It's sort of a best practice. While the policy already prohibits derivative projects, which is products, basically investing in the price of a product as opposed to the product itself. The policy says that if the district chooses to do that, they must adopt a policy specifically do that to do it. So add in another impediment, if you will, if we choose to go down that more risky investment route. Specify that the CIP will be the guiding document on determining the need and issuing for timing for issuing debt. So the CIP, as you may recall, it's been 3 years or so since we started that, and that is really integral to developing the projects for Measure O and so forth. So we want to recognize that that exists now and that capital projects will flow through that process. Let's see, finally, adds a sentence related to there's a section on refunding or refinancing debt. It's another best practice. Sentence states that the refunding should yield at least a 3% savings on principal. That's a floor to ensure that if we're looking at refundings or refinancings, that it's worth looking into and that the time and energy and pay and resources we put into it are actually worth it. So this is a board policy. My recommendation again is to review the debt management policy and refer to the full board for approval at the next meeting.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, the only question I had regarding derivatives, we rarely ever deal with anything like that, right? I mean, that's just.
On which one, the derivatives?
Derivatives, yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, or as far as I know, we never have.
Yeah,
I
that's
can
what
say
I'm
with
thinking. I don't
99%
even know
certainty
why
we
they-
haven't.
yeah,
Yeah. So,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah. Because that's just derivatives are risky anyway to
Yes.
begin with, so, yeah, okay. That was my.
If you go with me to the last page.
Mhm.
When it looks at the references, looks like we're referencing a reference. Can you put a date at the end of the reference there where we're referencing the district policy,
Yeah.
capital improvement program policy at 2015
Oh.
as a reference?
Sure.
Because this is the new one. And in addition to that, you mentioned that you ran this by a expert.
Municipal advisor, the one that's helping us with measure.
One of the things I think we need to get into the habit of doing is when we seek out those experts,
Mhm.
and I'm not claiming that anyone in the building is not. I'm just saying, why wouldn't we cite that as a reference? Because I think what it does is it says to the community that would be having nothing to do but look at these policies in the public space and say, well, where did they come up with some of this language? And you could show as a reference, we went to X organization and cited them as one of our references. I think what that does is it tells the community, we're not just doing this in-house and coming up with our own ideas. Some of the language that shows here is coming from an expert in this very niche area. And I love when I see references and it goes beyond the author or beyond the institution it's coming from, because it kind of lends credibility to the
Certainly.
document.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think if we could add that, because I was looking at this going, man, this is sophisticated stuff, from a financing standpoint. And the only thing we reference is our own policy. It's like, well, we referenced ourselves. We should be, and it's like, And then when you just justified the fact that you recognize we're going through this bond experience, I hope that in the future we prove that we're worthy enough to do it again. It
Mhm.
would be great to show that in the language that you've sought. So that'd be the only thing that I would
Yeah.
suggest. And I don't know that I want to make this a common thing that we do, but I think it's an area of policy where it's so sophisticated and it has a lot of elements to it that we just identify others that we've used as a way to make sure it's correct. What do you think?
On this one, I can definitely add that as cite the person and give it a
Organization.
formal citation.
Yeah.
What you're more broadly asking for, I probably want to refer that over.
No, and I'm
to-
not asking
yeah.
it for it to be more broad. I want it to keep it very specific to this piece because it's something we do very rarely
Mhm.
as far as some of this stuff. And so it's just something I think that helps when we reference people or reference organizations or expertise by identifying it to the public. It shows that we're not just trying to do it in-house.
Okay. See,
Would that kind of also be a little bit about transparency?
sure. Mhm.
The best answer would have been, that's excellent, Grant. Why don't we go ahead and do? No, just kidding. Anyway, thanks for that. Thanks for
Sure.
hearing that.
I can
Because
make that change. Yep,
I think that's
changes.
an important part of what we're doing. Thank you, Ms. Chair.
Okay, so this leads to my concern. So this policy was written in 2015.
Mhm.
It's been 10 years since it's been looked at.
Right. Mhm.
How many other policies in the financial that haven't been looked at?
In finance, I'm gonna say not many. I mean, there's we purchasing and contracting, we just saw in 2023. We did the whole budget and fiscal policy 3 years ago. I'm gonna list them off, but I would just briefly say not many. I have been tracking this one as needing since I got here as needing an update. And it was kind of this general.
How many more policies are we going to need to write because of Measure O?
Yeah.
I don't know of any, and from a financing perspective, that's one of the conversations I had with our consultant. What else do we need? And this was it. And again, this was given a satisfactory grade. It was if you can improve it by making these changes. Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
Because as I've said before, this concerns me that we have many policies throughout our policy grouping that are very old, and we need to get on top of this.
Mhm.
Well, Remember the chairman mentioning that he's been working with our staff to review a lot of our policies. So I think that's going on right now. Yeah, so.
Yes, and I know that a couple of months ago, we had a policy review.
Yeah.
And I would at some point like to talk to the policy people
Right.
about that.
Yeah, I think we've had that discussion last time when I'm chair regarding that.
And I think I unfortunately was sick and not here.
Yeah,
So,
that's right. So we did have that discussion. and
yeah.
It's been going on. Like I said, our chairman had mentioned it and he's been working diligently with staff regarding that same issue.
so,
I mean, am I? Right?
I wasn't at the last meeting. I'm getting a nod, yes.
Melissa, right?
okay.
Yeah, I
All right.
remember that.
So on this, I'll take a motion in a second.
I make a motion, we adopt the resolution at this level to be forwarded to the full board on debt management.
Second.
Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, Director Sailors,
Aye,
Director Clark,
Aye.
Director Gould.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
thank you.
Thank you.
Our next meeting will be July 10th, 2025, right here in these chambers, probably at 5:30. We are now adjourned. Thank you.